Now, normally I would introduce Clark Cooney, MMR, to do the after show, but Clark is traveling. I don't know whether they're going to let him back into Canada, but he's in the US right now. So I wish him the best of health during his trip and the best of luck getting back to Canada, his home. So with that said, let's start the after show and we can talk about whatever is on the minds of anybody that's viewing right now. So what would you like to talk about? Well, let me ask this question. What did you think about the N-Scale panel that we had tonight?
I thought it was quite informative. And very well done.
It was, like you, Jim, I started with a layout in N-Scale back in 73. And I was in an apartment, our first apartment when I was first married, but I soon moved away from it. Got a book, got a plan out of a book, followed it. And I really think actually it was probably a pretty good little layout, but I was so new. It was all brand new track on it and everything. And I put a feeder to every piece of rail, but I never cleaned the track because I thought this is brand new track. It doesn't have to be cleaned. I didn't know about oxidation and stuff. So I was rather disappointed with it. Of course, the engines were poor engines, but anyway, I moved on. So seeing these gentlemen tonight and what they've accomplished and, you know, an N-Scale, I have seen other N-Scale operating. There's a club near me in the east end of Toronto that has HO upstairs and, or sorry, N-Scale upstairs and HO downstairs. And they have quite a large operating layout to an N-Scale. So it has come a long way and they showed that. It was interesting that they figure the future might be power on board, battery on, you know, power on board the locomotives. I'm leaning maybe towards that in O-Scale. We have one fellow in our group, he's already got his layout switched. He got us into DCC in our group. Now he's moved on to power on board. So it's just the whole industry or the whole hobby is just marching on, you know, so.
Yeah, it really is. I was also interested in hearing them talk about power on board because I'm an O-Scale trolley guy. And that makes a lot of sense to me because, you know, you don't have the maintenance, not only of the track, you don't have the overhead wire maintenance. You don't have to keep it clean all the time.
Right, it was just cosmetic.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, mine functions, you know, I get power from the overhead and then my ground is the track. And I wire both rails together. So I'm picking up power from from either rail with my trolleys, but I have the overhead for the power. So, you know, battery on board makes a lot of sense to me. It would simplify my life at my age significantly.
Absolutely.
Anybody else have something to talk about?
Jim, you're talking about power on board. I thought a couple of years ago when when DCC really took off, that there was a manufacturer or some company was looking into actually producing that. And I actually thought at that time that would be the future of model railroading.
Yeah.
No power to the tracks and onboard locomotives.
Absolutely.
I don't know whatever happened to it.
I really don't either because I haven't heard about it that long, to tell you the truth. I've heard about it in G scale, but the size of the batteries and, you know, and my trolleys and so forth, I kind of said, well, you know, they're not there yet. I'll wait until they get a battery small enough. It'll run long enough for me to really get interested in it. Because some of my trolleys are really small. I'd have to put the batteries in something that I'm pulling behind by trolleys because a lot of them are open and there's just no place for a battery or anything else. Plus, I don't use DCC. I only run DC. So for me, the battery would be just a logical next step into trying to simplify the operation of my railroad.
I'm seeing things like, you know, having places on the track marshaling yards or whatnot, where you actually have a charging station that you just roll into. Seeing, what they're doing with phones now, where you just, throw it on a little platform and charge it up without having to plug it in or anything like that. Also, on the phone thing, they have these little magnetic connectors now that do the charging. You just get it close and boom, it connects. That would be something really neat to see done with brake line hoses. So, you can transfer power from one engine to the other or into the cars or whatnot. I'd love to see something like that evolve.
Well, I got the guy from, somebody mentioned while they were talking about the local fire. And I've got one of the modelers that created that system coming on the show, I think in a month, 6 weeks, something like that. And they're really refining that system. Every time I hear from him, they've done this or that, or they've modified this, or they've added that. And they really are coming, they really are putting a lot of effort and time into that local fire system that'll run off your telephone. And put a battery in it, and you're operating your trains by your telephone.
We, in the Southern Ontario area where I am, we had a gentleman, we visited him. He's in south part of Ontario, maybe a half an hour from where I am, in Chatham. And this is going back, maybe 12 years ago. We visited his layout. He ran everything from his telephone. He had it all hooked up. He'd just use his phone. His trains would stop. They would go to wherever he wanted them to go, all by his telephone.
Yep.
It was amazing to see it.
And Toronto, here we have a large O-scale layout, and they moved to a new location. So they've rebuilt. And so one of the things they moved to DCC, and again, like you say, Gary, they can operate from their cell phones, or they give out to members. If you don't have a smartphone, they'll give you one of these little tablets, and you can just expand when you operate the train. But when you're coming into the yard, rather than have a large panel with all the tracks on the yard and that, and you have to touch switches to throw the switches, you do it on this pad. You just expand it in the area you're in on the throat of the yard, and you're throwing the switches. I'm just amazed by it. And the biggest thing too, and then what Jim, if you're even in DCC, is keep alive. And it just really improves the operation. But then you don't have, you have to worry about dirty track. And that's what I have downstairs right now is DCC. And I have to clean my track all the time. And I don't run it for, and then all of a sudden I want to run it. Well, I got to spend half an hour cleaning track minimum to be satisfied with it, because I run trains very slow. But it's all improving. As I said, my friend that got into DCC or started the DCC in our group, he's doing most of us are ON3, and he's CNS. So of the Colorado railroads, 3 major ones, he has the smaller locomotives. The biggest locomotives are 280. A lot of them are moguls, and the moguls have very small tenders, so equivalent to a lot of stuff in HO. And he gets it all in there, and he can run for. Well, he brought one the very first time to another fellow's layout had good grades over 2.5%, and that engine performed all afternoon at one of our meets, just running over a huge layout, and still had lots of power, I guess, left in the battery. So for most of us, we have a fleet of locomotives. Maybe you choose one locomotive and stick it on a train. It may have to only run 20 minutes, or maybe an hour with some switching, and then you pick up another train with another locomotive. So you don't have to look at something that's going to run all day or for the whole week without charging. And actually, I've got some downstairs I haven't charged for a year, and I can go down, run the little wand over, it turns them on, magnets, and they go. It's just, it amazes me.
But you know, in say 5-10 years from now, I think the size of the batteries are going to be so much different.
Oh, yeah.
And no telling what the technology will be by then. So, you know, I agree with the N-scalers. To me, that's the future. I may be crazy, but to me, that's the future.
Well, what's the next stage of batteries? What, solid state now, isn't it?
Well, I don't know. I haven't heard anybody talk about that.
I think that's what they're pushing.
May well be. May well be. And I think really it's up to, again, one of the people on the panel talked about the NMAA developing this LCC. You know, I thought he had a good point. If the NMRA had spent as much effort dealing with battery power, I think it might be further along and further accepted today than it is. Because a lot of people haven't really heard of it, haven't really looked at it. Or if they have heard of it, they haven't really gone into really looking at the manufacturers and talking to them and seeing if it would work for them.
Well, nanographene, I don't know if you all ever heard of that. This is highly experimental, but they are working on, this is like graphene, like in your pencil, you know, but it's like one atom thick, and it's structurally very sound or whatnot. But they're also scientists are looking into using it as a energy storage technology. And if that comes to fruition, then you know, the sky's the limit as far as battery power.
See, I've never heard of that technology before.
Yeah, it kind of popped up about a year ago, at least on my radar. And you know, all it is it's graphite, but it's like one atom thick, and that's what they're experimenting with. And just
I got no idea how big an atom is.
Smaller than a dot.
In what scale?
You probably stepped on a lot of them today and never even saw them.
I figured that.
I know a guy named Adam. No, so if you guys get a chance, you know, Google graphene and just start reading up on it and some of the weird stuff they're doing with it. It's pretty fascinating.
I'd say so. My God.
Never believe atoms. They make up everything.
Take the battery out of your pacemaker.
I think with our industry, it started battery, you know, power on board for out in the garden railroads. And that has been around, and so those people just concentrated on units for in the large locomotives. They didn't think of, you know, us wanting to have it in the house, and especially like HO and smaller scales. So nobody worked on that, I would assume. And so it's probably held it back to some degree, but we are really forging ahead with, you know, with all the electronics that's been introduced.
Well, that's where I heard about it, from the G-scalers.
Mhm.
Because they've been using that in radio control, gosh, for years.
That's right. And, you know, fellows like David Woodhead, I've been over and he was, you know, on a budget, but those, and a lot of those fellows, but they would get creative. They would be buying their batteries, the batteries that are used for power tools at Home Depot, and using those large, you know, he says
Yeah.
it's relatively inexpensive, especially when it always seems whenever a drill is out for about 5 years, try to find a battery now that fit, works for that.
Mm.
Yep, yep,
So
you're right.
Eric, I've enjoyed looking at your fish tank all night. I haven't seen any animals in there or fish, but I love the planted tank.
Keep the fish in there to keep the plants alive.
Can't see the fish.
They're mostly tetras, and you see the orange blurb in the middle of the tree. Let's see. That's a Paclostibus right there,
Yeah, I see it. Okay.
and he just eats algae and hangs out.
Right.
About once a week, my wife will come down and say, "Is he dead?"
Well, I kept thinking I'd see a school of tetras, but I haven't seen anything in there, but it certainly is a well-planted tank. It's beautiful.
Yeah, I've had this thing running constantly through 3 moves now, since 1989.
Mm.
Good grief.
And the scratches on the glass will testify to that.
And no leaks.
No leaks.
Excellent.
Eric, what's the oldest N-scale engine you got from your collection?
Probably either a Lima or a Mahano. Of course, I showed you this little guy. This is definitely a Lima. Oh yeah, I've got to bring this one out. You guys remember? Let's see. I'm sorry, I'm trying to play with the. You remember
good.
the round motor in the front, single drive?
Yeah,
This is like an early Atlas. Those were, totally fun, non-repairable engines. If I ever get a hold of an old sewing machine or whatnot, I may try to rig it up to redo the wiring on some motors. Because it has a little bobbin in it. But I'll have to read up on that. It's just one of those little things you need to play with. I've heard of, in my guitar research and whatnot, in order to make the coils on for the electric guitars, some companies, which are basically mom and pops, were actually using sewing machines to wind the coils.
huh.
Well, being kind of a slot car guy, Eric, there's a lot of places that rewind slot car motors. I wonder if that would be a help for you.
Probably. I mean, these, a lot of these, I've got a whole bunch of old motors that, one of the windings somewhere along the line, the smoke got out. And of course, we all know motors don't work when there's no smoke in them. Yeah, I'd really like to, some of these really old ones, I'd love to redo the motors. I mean, it took
Well,
me.
you might want to reach out across the pond and talk to somebody in the slot car industry.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, I guess the hardest thing to find is new windings for the pancake motors. I don't know why. This is the worst freaking motor ever designed, but I love them. Because it's just something that just shouldn't work, and they do. Not well, but they do.
Kind of reminiscent of the Wankel.
Yeah. It's great idea on paper.
Well, Pat, if you want to stop the recording on YouTube now, then we can continue this as long as anybody wants to keep talking, but we just won't be recording. There you go.
There you go.
Thanks, Pat.
Well, I'm going to excuse myself for the evening and go get some much needed shut eye. I have to help my youngest son move to a more expensive apartment tomorrow.
Well, you'll need all your strength.
Yes, definitely, definitely. Lots of painkillers. Good
Thanks
night,
again.
all. Been a great
Thanks.
pleasure, Jim. Thank you for having me on board.
I loved it. Thank you.
Good night.
And I'm really serious. I'd like to do what we did tonight with this panel on N scale. I'd like to do it with other scales. TT scale. I'd love to have people that model in that come on and we could create a panel to find out about that scale.
Well, Jim, with TT scale here in Canada, some of the shows that we've done on the West Coast, like in Calgary and so on, the guy comes up to me one time, he says, "You don't produce anything in TT scale." And I said, "What's TT scale?" And they have a small group out in British Columbia that's in TT. So he wanted me to produce some kits. So what we did, instead of producing kits, we produced the drawings, because in AutoCAD, that's just a mathematical thing to the printer, okay? So we had TT kits sitting here for, I don't know, 10 or 12 years, sold one, maybe two. And then I was talking to the fellow who owns Central Hobbies in Vancouver. And he said, "Did you ever